Well, good morning. It's once again a pleasure to be here at Valbruna ASW today, recognizing and celebrating Labor Day, something that we do every year and something we do in celebration of the people that are standing behind me, all the workers throughout not only this nation but also throughout this great region. So I want to welcome everyone here today, and I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are on the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples, and to give great respect for all throughout the Niagara region and, of course, this great nation. I'm so glad that we can all gather here today at Valbruna ASW, and I want to take this opportunity to give sincere appreciation to Tim Clutterbuck, as well as the entire team here at Valbruna ASW, for hosting us at this fine facility. Also with us is representation from Unifor, Local 199, and I do want to welcome Doug LeBlanc, who leads the Unifor team here at Valbruna ASW. And I also want to thank Doug and the entire team over at Unifor for their continuing leadership in the labor movement. Ladies and gentlemen, the steel and aluminum industry is a keystone of the Canadian economy, and we recognize that here in the Niagara region, especially in the South Niagara area of the Niagara region, but especially and throughout the Golden Horseshoe into Hamilton and other areas of southwestern Ontario. It contributes to thousands of jobs, many families depending on the steel and aluminum industry. It's worth millions of dollars toward our economic growth, not only here in Niagara, throughout the Golden Horseshoe, but across this great country. It is an industry we take pride in. It is an industry that we fight hard for. Many of you may remember years ago, we were thrown a curveball by the Trump administration, who imposed tariffs on steel and aluminum. We worked extremely hard to counter those tariffs. A champion of the steel industry, Tim Clutterbuck, was at the table with all of us on the Hill, especially with my colleague, Chrystia Freeland, who at that time was working extremely hard to ensure that we had a response that was on behalf of all Canadians. While standing with me today is the woman who worked with Tim and many others to not only hit that curveball, but smash it out of the park. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you our candidate for University of Rosedale, Chrystia Freeland. Chrystia.
Well, I always need a little help in the height department, but I guess I need a little more help even. Well, thank you for that kind introduction, Vance. Thank you, Tim. Thank you so much to all the workers who are here. It is really great to celebrate Labor Day with you. Bon matin de tout le monde et bonne fête du travail. Je tiens à reconnaître que nous sommes sur le territoire traditionnel des peuples Haudenosaunee et Anishinaabe, and it is great to be here with our great candidates from Niagara, Ian, Andrea, Chris, and Vance, who I know will make exceptional representatives for this community. I'd like to start by talking a little bit about a time that I know people here in Niagara, people here in Valbruna remember very, very well. When Donald Trump threatened to rip up our trade deal with the United States and impose illegal and frankly insulting 232 national security tariffs on our Canadian steel and aluminum, we all knew that if we stood firm and worked together as Team Canada, we would prevail. And we did. We did the right thing, and it worked. But we should all also remember that not everyone at the time supported our dollar-for-dollar retaliation against Donald Trump. Not everyone had the nerve to stand strong when the fight got really tough. I know that people here in Niagara remember that the Conservative Party told our government to give up and to accept a quota deal. In fact, Erin O'Toole openly and explicitly attacked our firm position in question period in the House of Commons. He said that Canada's retaliation was hurting Canada more than the US. He said that our retaliation was dumb, that our retaliatory tariffs should be removed. We know now, with hindsight, that he was totally wrong. Everyone here knows that when the going gets tough, our government will stand up for you. That's what we did when Donald Trump attacked our steel industry. That's what we did when COVID hit Canada. And you also know that as soon as things get hard, Erin O'Toole's Conservatives want to give in and give up. Lorsque la COVID a frappé, nous sommes restés fidèles à notre conviction que le Canada est à son meilleur quand nous nous soutenons les uns les autres. Nous savions que nous devions mettre en place un filet de sécurité pour les Canadiens et Canadiennes et les entreprises canadiennes, y compris ici en Ontario. Un Ontarien sur 4 a reçu la PCU. 2,1 millions d'emplois en Ontario ont été protégés par la subvention salariale et 19,6 milliards de dollars ont été livrés aux entreprises ontariennes sous forme de prêts. If we are re-elected, we will continue to be there for the people of Ontario and the people of Canada. We're investing to build a strong and resilient Canadian steel industry that will be competitive in the 21st century low-carbon economy. The fact is that we're at a turning point in the global economy right now. The green transition is happening around the world. That's simply the reality. And the big question for Canada, the big question for Niagara is, will we lead that green transition or will we be left behind? With programs like the $8 billion Net Zero Accelerator Fund, our government will help protect good steel jobs and support our manufacturers as they go green. We know how to make things here in Ontario. Now is the time to invest to make them green. But if Erin O'Toole's Conservatives are elected on September 20th, they will not give Niagara workers the support that you need to go green, just as they wanted Canada to give up and not give you the support you needed in the 232 steel tariff fight. That's why this election matters so much. And that's why I am so glad to again turn the floor over to my friend and companion in the 232 trenches, Vance.
Well, thank you, Chrystia. Today we stand in the site of the former Atlas Steels. Many of us recall back in 30s, well, not us, but maybe some others, back in the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s, the Atlas Steels team, and of course with that, the many people it affected. At one time, as many of you know, this plant was buzzing with over 3,000 employees. It was an industrial as well as a cultural hub here in the city of Welland and throughout this Niagara region. Part of the fabric of the very community we stand in today. Something that everyone was extremely proud of here in the city of Welland and of course once again throughout the Niagara region. In fact, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone in the city of Welland who didn't work at this plant, or whose brother, mom, dad, or a relative didn't work at this plant. But we were faced with challenges throughout the years. For example, under the 10 years of a Conservative government, we were left behind. We had an NDP member of Parliament for 6 years here in the riding who did nothing to fight for this industry or for Niagara. Overnight, throughout this riding in Niagara Centre, we lost John Deere, we lost Energex, we lost Hayes Dana, the pulp and paper mills in Thorold, just to name a few. Thousands of jobs, not over years, over months. We lost our manufacturing core. However, since 2015, working directly with our many local partners, who is to be given the credit for the resurgence that this riding, this region is now experiencing. And to this Prime Minister, whom I'm happy to call a friend, a person who cares, a person who's genuine. With that and the effort working with our partners, working with our team up on the Hill, this region, this riding, is seeing that resurgence. We've truly capitalized off our proud manufacturing industry and brought in new investments to stimulate and to strengthen economic growth here in the riding, the region, and southwestern Ontario that contributes to the overall national economic strategy. Together, we are breathing new life back into this region, which is long overdue. ASW today, with their new partnership with Valbruna, is set to thrive again, as well as additional partnerships that build off Niagara's transportation assets and strategic location, such as the partnership between Port Colborne, Welland, and Thorold, and the Hamilton-Oshawa Port Authority to create a multimodal trade corridor, creating thousands of new jobs. It's all about partnerships. It's all about working together. A government working together with local industry to ensure sustainable economic growth. Since 2015, under bold leadership, we've already begun to build back better. And with that, it gives me great pleasure to pass the mic over to the leader who will continue to push all of us, not only here in Niagara, but throughout this great nation, directly in the right direction. Folks, the leader of the Liberal Party of Canada, Justin Trudeau.
Thank you, Vance. Bonjour tout le monde. Happy Labor Day. I want to take a moment, first off, to thank the folks here behind me today for their hard work, and folks like them right across the country. I want to specifically single out Doug, who's the head of Unifor here, who I had a great chat with earlier and with his kids. The reality is that over the past 6 years, we have worked incredibly closely with labor unions around the country, first to reverse the anti-union measures that the last Conservative government brought in. People in the labor movement will remember 525 and 377 that Erin O'Toole voted for, but worked with them mostly to get Canada's economy back on track, with good jobs for the middle class, with ambition for the future, including on innovation and fighting climate change. So it's a real pleasure to be here for Labor Day with all of them, focused on their future and their family's future. It's also great to be here with Vance, Chrystia, and our outstanding Liberal candidates for the Niagara area, Chris, Andrea, and Ian. My friends, Canada has celebrated a lot of Labor Day weekends in our history. But I don't know if there has ever been a time when workers have done more for this country. Whether you're a grocery store employee who's kept our plates full, or a steel worker who's kept our economy going strong, in the last 18 months, you've rolled up your sleeves and done your part. And you reminded us that we are always stronger together. And I couldn't agree more. In 2020, when this pandemic hit, we rolled out the wage subsidy so people here at ASW Steel and across the country could stay on the job. In 2017, when the US threatened to tear up NAFTA, we fought for a good deal for Canadian workers, even as the Conservatives wanted Canada to give up. And then, when the Americans imposed steel tariffs, we hit back dollar for dollar. And that's why Donald Trump stood down. But what did Aaron O'Toole think of all that? He actually called Canada's retaliatory dollar-for-dollar tariffs dumb policy. Aaron O'Toole would have given in to Donald Trump and given up on these Canadians. We knew that wasn't the way forward. Not on steel, and not on anything. Quand Donald Trump a imposé des tarifs sur l'aluminium, on s'est battu jusqu'à ce que ces tarifs soient annulés. Chrystia Freeland pourrait vous en dire bien longuement. Quand il y a des emplois en jeu et des gens à défendre, on se tient debout. Et maintenant, en 2021, on ne lâche pas. On travaille fort pour en finir avec la COVID-19 et rebâtir un Canada plus fort pour les travailleurs et les familles de la classe moyenne. To get people back to work, we'll extend the Canada Recovery Hiring Program, which makes it easier not just to hire people, but to boost wages to address the labor shortage some sectors are facing. To help Canadian industries like steel thrive for years to come, we'll keep investing to grow business in competitive and greener ways. And for our next generation of workers, we'll support apprenticeships across the country. My friends, from NAFTA to COVID, we've had your back. And now, we're ready to keep moving forward. And our first order of business is beating this pandemic for good. That's why we'll foot the bill for provinces and territories, including here in Ontario, to roll out proof of vaccination programs. As we do, we'll make sure that everyone 12 or older on a plane or train is vaccinated. That's really important, especially for strong tourist regions like Niagara. If people don't feel safe, they won't come here. If there's a spike in cases, they can't come here. The businesses here have had too tough a year and a half to go backward now. But that's exactly what would happen with Aaron O'Toole and his weak leadership on vaccines. So remember, if you haven't already, now's the time to get your shots. Because vaccines not only keep you safe and our economy on track, they'll get everyone back to brighter days faster. So yesterday, Chrystia and I went to visit Toronto General Hospital, and we got to speak with some of the amazing doctors, nurses, and healthcare workers who stepped up during this pandemic and continue to step up every single day. And I had some really touching conversations, some about the triage process, and a lot about, I asked one of the nurses what she said to those unvaccinated people fighting for their lives against COVID. What conversations did she have with these people who'd chosen to not get vaccinated and yet now lay in the ICU in terrible situations? And did they understand? Did they regret? What did they say? What did she say to them? And her answer was, they don't say anything. I said, really, are they that stubborn that they're still hanging into that? No, they don't say anything because they are intubated. They're on life support. They're in comas. or at least unconscious. The people they see in that ICU are in serious fights for their life, and not up for chatting about how they got there. What they deserve is leadership that helps them make the right decision, that is unequivocal on the way to get through this as being vaccination. Erin O'Toole is trying to pretend that testing is as good as vaccinations. No, we're not forcing our candidates to get vaccinated, he says. We're making sure they get tested. Well, testing doesn't prevent you from ending up in the ICU. If you've tested positive, you've already got COVID. The fact that Erin O'Toole can't show and won't show leadership on this is worrisome, particularly for all the people who did the right thing and got vaccinated and got through these tough years and just want to get back to normal. And, according to Mr. O'Toole, should be at risk if they get on a plane of catching COVID from the person across the aisle, of exposing their kid in a restaurant to someone with COVID, of risking themselves every time they go to the gym to get healthy. That's not the path we want to be on. Les Canadiens comprennent l'importance des vaccins. Mais M. O'Toole ne comprend pas. Even as anti-vaxxers harass frontline healthcare workers, Erin O'Toole wouldn't make sure everyone on a plane or train is vaccinated. In fact, he won't even make sure his own candidates are vaccinated. And why? It's simple. Because the far-right, anti-vax fringe wing of his party won't let him. What Erin O'Toole is doing isn't leadership. It's pandering to special interests. And not just on vaccines. Erin O'Toole a promis au lobby des armes qu'il allait rendre les armes d'assaut légales à nouveau. Et en plus, il tente de cacher la vérité aux Canadiens. Yesterday, Erin O'Toole was asked if he had a secret deal with the gun lobby. Yes or no? He wouldn't answer. He was asked which of the assault weapons that we banned would he make legal again? The one that killed women in Montreal, 14 of them at École Polytechnique? The ones that killed innocent people in Nova Scotia? He wouldn't answer that either. Look, Canadians know that assault weapons have no place in our communities or in our country. You know that. I know that. This Liberal team knows that. But instead of coming clean with Canadians, Erin O'Toole is using coded language, weasel words, to try to make his position on military-style assault weapons sound reasonable. It's not. You can't promise one day in your platform to repeal our assault weapon ban, and then the next day pretend that you're going to lead consultations in partnership with the gun lobby. Come on. Consultations? We banned military-style assault weapons in this country. The only consultations can therefore be, well, which ones should we unban? Maybe that's why when Erin O'Toole tries to pretend that he's reversed his position, the gun lobby continues to stand with him and support him, because they know what he intends to do, because he made them a promise. You can't commit to legalize the gun used at École Polytechnique one day and the next day pretend that, no, you stand for safer communities. You can't pretend that you can't say you're going to repeal lifetime background checks for people who want to buy a gun, and then turn around and say, yes, but you really want to protect Canadians. That's not leadership. That's bowing to the fringe politics that want to take back Canada. It's not just on vaccines. It's not just on guns. It's on more private, for-profit health care to give the wealthy better choices. It's on scrapping $10 a day childcare to give the middle class fewer choices. It's not standing up to climate deniers or the oil lobby. It's giving in to his MPs and anti-choice groups on women's rights. Quand plus de 80 de ses députés ont tenté de restreindre l'accès à l'avortement, Erin O'Toole n'a rien fait parce qu'il ne voulait pas se mettre à dos les groupes anti-choix. C'est pas du leadership, ça. Et c'est surtout pas le genre de leadership que ça nous prend pour finir notre lutte contre la COVID-19 et bâtir un Canada plus fort. Mes amis, cette élection est très importante. Nous, on a un vrai plan, ambitieux et positif, et on est prêt à le mettre en œuvre dès maintenant. Last Wednesday, I laid out our progressive plan to move forward for everyone. We'll invest in stronger public health care, not experiment with privatization. We'll make owning a home more affordable, especially for young families. We'll keep fighting for $10 a day childcare, including here in Ontario, so that kids can get the best start, parents can balance work and family, and our economy can come back even stronger. And people in this part of the country, this beautiful part of the country, even as we stand inside the steel plant, know how important it is to fight climate change. And I was talking with Tim earlier about all the innovations they've made here over the years in this plant, working on recycled steel, starting from scraps, moving already towards electric arc furnaces, a move that we're investing in some of our biggest steel plants at Dofasco and Algoma to move them off of coal to be electric arc, because that's how we make cleaner, more precision steel the way they're already doing right here. We know that we need to stand up and tackle with the same intensity we were able to tackle this pandemic crisis, we need to take to the climate crisis. And that, quite frankly, is something that progressives across this country are expecting and demanding. And that's why it's so puzzling to me that the NDP chose not to step up in the fight against climate change in this election. And don't just take my word for it. Top environmentalists, top economists, top scientists have noted that once again the Liberals have an extremely ambitious and concrete plan to continue our fight against climate change. But the NDP's plan got an F. They failed to be concrete and realistic, but they also failed to be ambitious enough. And that's a shock to progressives across the country, and quite frankly, it's disappointing to us because we'd expected that the NDP would continue to push hard on the fight against climate change. Instead, they seem to have given up, particularly when some people are rating the Conservative plan to fight climate change, which involves going back to Stephen Harper, as better than even the NDP plan that they're putting forward in their platform, which makes no sense, but that's for the NDP to explain. Nous, on va continuer de prendre des mesures concrètes et ambitieuses pour lutter contre les changements climatiques et pour créer des bons emplois. Et surtout, on va en finir avec la pandémie une bonne fois pour toutes. Pour ça, ça prend du vrai leadership. Que ce soit pour défendre les travailleurs ou les vaccins, on va être là pour vous. On a fait beaucoup de chemin ensemble. Et je sais qu'on peut aller encore plus loin. My friends, I'm ready for the hard work. I'm ready for hope. I'm ready to move forward for everyone. Merci.
Thank you, Leader Trudeau. We'll start the question period. 20 minutes, one question, one follow-up, starting with Laura Stone from the Globe and Mail.
Good morning. Thanks for taking our questions. I wanted to first ask about guns and some concerns that were raised by one of your own MPs over the military-style assault rifle ban, particularly around lawful gun owners, and saying it unfairly targets people who are following the law, who may shoot for sport or hunters. How do you respond to that, and what do you say to those people who feel they're being unfairly targeted by your government?
We made a decision well over a year ago to ban military-style assault weapons in this country. All our MPs voted in favor of that. We've been unequivocal, and we know that some people are disappointed. Some people disagree with that decision. But we felt as a government that it was a decision that needed to be taken. So we made it illegal to use, to buy, or to sell 1,500 different models of military-style assault weapons in this country. It's not unanimous. There are people who very much want those guns to continue to be in our communities and in our country, but we said no. That's taking a position. That's showing leadership and actually acting on something that matters to Canadians. What we're seeing from Aaron O'Toole is he's trying to squeeze through a position where he made promises to the gun lobby to reverse this ban. And now the Canadians are rightly outraged that he wants to bring back assault weapons. He's trying to figure out how to please everyone and not upset people by not taking too clear or too strong a position, not answering questions. That's not leadership. That's not integrity. Canadians are beginning to know what those of us who watch him in the House have known for a long time about Aaron O'Toole, is that he'll say anything to try and get elected. He'll take any position and say opposite things to people on different parts of the country. That's not the kind of strength and leadership that Canadians deserve. Not now, at the end of this pandemic, and not for how we build a better, safer future for everyone.
En français.
Nous avons pris une décision claire il y a plusieurs années qu'on a mis en place il y a plus d'un an. Depuis le mois de mai passé, c'est devenu illégal de vendre, d'acheter ou d'utiliser des armes d'assaut de style militaire dans ce pays. Évidemment, il y a des gens dans le lobby des armes à feu qui sont mécontents de cette décision, mais c'est une position claire que nous avons partagée avec les Canadiens et que nous avons amenée comme décision. Ces fusils-là qui ont été utilisés à Polytechnique, au Collège Dawson, qui étaient à Portapic, qui étaient dans la mosquée à Sainte-Foy, n'ont pas leur place dans notre pays. Voilà, c'est ma position. Il y en a qui sont en désaccord, mais je sais que la plus grande majorité des Canadiens sont d'accord avec moi, parce que c'est la bonne chose à faire. Mais M. O'Toole, lui, il a fait des promesses au lobby des armes à feu pour se faire élire, de renverser ce qu'on a fait pour bannir les armes d'assaut. Et là, il s'est fait prendre jeudi passé, et il doit renverser des décisions qu'il avait prises et qu'il a données dans sa plateforme. Il vient de changer sa plateforme, soi-disant. Mais ce n'est pas ça du leadership. Ce n'est pas ça de l'intégrité. De faire une promesse à l'un, mais de dire à d'autres que non, on ne va pas le faire finalement. Surtout sur quelque chose de si important comme la sécurité des Canadiens et les armes militaires de style assaut. Ben, ça n'a pas de bon sens. Mais on le sait depuis longtemps que Aaron O'Toole est très à l'aise de dire une chose à un groupe et d'autres choses à un autre groupe parce qu'il va tout faire pour se faire élire. Ben, c'est ça, pas ça le genre de leadership dont les Canadiens ont besoin maintenant. Ce n'est pas le genre de leadership qui mérite pour l'avenir, où on a des grandes décisions à prendre pour lutter contre les changements climatiques, pour bâtir un pays plus équitable, pour créer de l'opportunité économique pour tous.
You mentioned your visit to UHN yesterday. This morning, Aaron O'Toole criticized you for that, for holding an event at a hospital, which has a very strict visitation policy. Can you respond to that if you think it was appropriate for you to attend that setting? And can you also clarify how many Liberal candidates remain unvaccinated? Your campaign had previously said it was a couple. You said in the debate it was just one. If you could just clarify that. Thank you so much.
Let me start with that. Except for one medical exemption, all of our Liberal candidates are fully vaccinated. That's what Canadians expect. That's what Aaron O'Toole can't even offer as a basic level of reassurance to Canadians. He's still trying to pretend that testing is as good as vaccines, which is ridiculous. Once you test positive, you have COVID. I know Canadians over the past number of days have been horrified to see images of ambulances slowed down by crowds of anti-vaxxers, health workers harassed and intimidated as they go into work to save people's lives. These people have worked unbelievably hard over the past year and a half, and all of us Canadians, all of us as political parties have saluted them as heroes. If Mr. O'Toole wants to recognize the work that our healthcare workers, frontline heroes have done over the past year, he should start by thanking them. He should start by being unequivocal on vaccinations to lighten their workload and make sure that less unvaccinated people are in the emergency rooms or in the intensive care units across the country. I was honored to be able to stand and directly thank some of the people who are doing unbelievably hard work to continue to keep Canadians safe, even in this fourth wave of the unvaccinated. And of course, we worked closely with the hospital to ensure that all the right health protocols were followed. We are not going to put anyone at risk, but we needed those healthcare workers there and across the country to know that we stand with them, that we think it's not okay for them to be insulted and harassed, even as they're busy burning themselves out, putting their families through incredibly difficult times to save people's lives.
Next question.
Hi, Mr. Trudeau. Abigail Beeman, Global News. On your policy for workers, your labour mobility tax credit is identical to the Conservative construction tax credit, right down to the $4,000 deductible amount. Conservatives are also promising to pay the Canada Workers Benefit quarterly, as you are, except they're promising to double it, and yours is staying the same. So how do you win those worker votes that Conservatives are now trying to target?
Workers aren't fools. First of all, they remember well that Aaron O'Toole voted in favor of the anti-union legislation that the government he was part of under Stephen Harper had brought forward. Canadians will remember that. But the other thing, and this applies to any promise Aaron O'Toole is making, first of all, can we really believe him, because he's already shown he's willing to scrap or pretend to scrap some of the promises that are written in black and white in his platform. But more importantly, and particularly on the economic issues, he hasn't shown any of his costing. He isn't actually showing his work. He's not telling us how much he thinks that's going to cost, how it's going to work out overall, what money he's going to put forward if he forms government for this initiative or that initiative. So it's nothing but a collection of verbal promises without showing the work. So until he comes forward with a costed platform, I'm not going to give his platform any credence other than a loose collections of maybe he'll do this, but we already know that that's not even very serious.
Following up.
On your promise of 10 paid sick days, obviously that's something the NDP and others have been calling for quite some time. If it was so important, how come you haven't gotten it done in the past 6 years?
Actually, we moved forward mandating sick leave in federally regulated industries a number of years ago, well ahead of the provinces and territories. And we're stepping up once again in the federal sector to mandate 10 days paid sick leave. And we're also going to work with the provinces because obviously the federally regulated sector is only a fraction of the workforce, but the leadership that we have shown well before this pandemic and are showing now on 10 days paid sick leave is exactly the kind of thing we need, not just in federally regulated industries, but in industries across all sectors, and for that we'll work with the provinces.
Next question.
Hi, Mr. Trudeau. Hannah Thibodeau from CBC National News. I'd like to ask you a little bit about the protests that I saw yesterday. How do you feel your supporters, I was standing with them for a while, are being screamed at, cursed at? There were some who had racial slurs thrown at them, including some who had very young children there. Do you feel that you're putting them in a bad position to come out and support you?
I can't back down from standing up for Canadians. I won't back down for standing up for Canadians. And I know that our Liberal candidates and Liberal supporters across the country are made more determined in seeing just how stark the choices are in this election. I mean, for people who still wonder, whether or not we really needed an election right now, just take a look at the issues and the intensity of debate over so many big issues that really matter to Canadians. The clear and stark differences between our various approaches for this country. The clear and stark differences in leadership style. And yes, there is a small fringe element in this country that is angry, that doesn't believe in science, that is lashing out with racist, misogynistic attacks. But Canadians, the vast majority of Canadians, are not represented by them. And I know will not allow those voices, those special interest groups, those protesters who can, I don't even want to call them protesters, those anti-vaxxer mobs, to dictate how this country gets through this pandemic and how we recover our economy free from lockdowns, where people can get back to work and back to doing the things they want to do and keep our kids safe. They don't get to dictate policy of this government. So it is puzzling to people to see that on vaccines and on so many other things, Erin O'Toole is at least taking some of his cues from them. Canadians need leadership, and I know Liberals across the country are willing to stand up to ensure Canadians get that.
Oh, Jose.
Je ne vais pas reculer. Je ne vais pas hésiter de continuer à me battre pour un Canada où les gens sont protégés, où le Canada où les gens suivent la science, le Canada où on peut éviter d'autres confinements pour revenir à la vie normale. Et je sais que tous les libéraux, candidats et militants à travers le pays sont aussi prêts à se tenir debout pour un Canada meilleur. C'est désolant de voir cette minorité frustrée, ces gens marginalisés, cette petite fraction de notre population qui ne croit pas dans la science, menacés de nous ramener en arrière. Mais c'est encore plus désolant de voir que Erin O'Toole doit leur laisser de la place dans sa vision de comment on va avancer. Pour moi, nous allons être sans équivoque et déterminés. Nous allons finir la lutte contre cette pandémie avec la vaccination, nous allons rebâtir en mieux pour tout le monde.
I want to ask you about maybe your thought process during that event there yesterday. They were about 20 feet away. You kind of pointed at them, you waved to them, you touched your heart to them. What was your thought process during that? And then they were cursing you out.
Yes, there were a lot of angry anti-vaxxers there, but there were also mingled in among them some supporters who were feeling perhaps beset, but brave enough to come out and stand beside screaming people who weren't wearing masks, threatening all sorts of violence. And in that particular moment where I turned to look over the balcony, there was a group of young women, specifically racialized women, who were waving at me. And when I smiled and said thank you for being there, and yes, greeted them, and they cheered and said thank you, I was talking to them. And it is something that we have to reflect on, that even in Canada, where yes, there are angry mobs who are threatening violence and hurling racist epithets, there are people coming out to stand beside them and say, we support you, keep it up. We know vaccines are the way through this. People who come out and will bear the shouts and the insults because they believe in choosing a better future than the one that those anti-vaxxers are fighting for. So yes, even at the risk of knowing that people thought I might be waving at those anti-vaxxers who I was basically ignoring, because I won't respond to anger with anger, I'll just ignore them. But I will encourage and thank those Canadians who are willing to stand up for the path they know is right for them and their communities.
Prochaine question.
Bonjour, M. Trudeau. Laurence Martin, Radio-Canada. Justement, hier soir, à Newmarket, vous avez pris plusieurs minutes avant de descendre de l'autobus qui était encerclé par des manifestants. Qui est-ce qui décide, en fait, qui est-ce qui prend la décision finale si vous descendez ou pas de l'autobus?
La décision finale sera toujours prise par la GRC si les gens qui sont là pour la sécurité ne peuvent pas assurer que la sécurité de mon équipe, mais surtout des gens qui sont là, la décision sera prise de ne pas le faire. Et il y a toujours des discussions à ce niveau-là, mais pour moi, la sécurité des gens qui sont là doit être en avant de tout. Mais on a pris la décision ensemble, et la GRC fait partie de cette discussion, que si on le faisait d'une certaine façon, on minimisait jusqu'à un niveau acceptable les risques de la situation. The final decision on whether people are going to be at risk and whether we move forward with something needs to be those responsible for keeping Canadians safe on a minute-by-minute basis. The local police and the RCMP specifically, who are there to keep my team safe, but also everyone who comes out, including the anti-vaxxers. Their job is to keep everyone safe. And if there is a situation where truly people are at risk, at serious risk, and they don't feel they can keep things safe, then they will make a final call. But in discussions, because there are always discussions going on, we were able to find a way that minimized the risk to everyone and allowed us to continue to go ahead with meeting and thanking supporters and talking about the way we need to move forward, and that's what we did.
En suivi.
Moi, je me suis demandé hier soir si vous alliez sortir de l'autobus parce qu'il y avait beaucoup de manifestants et on sait qu'un dérapage est très vite arrivé. Je comprends que vous avez eu des discussions avec la GRC, mais est-ce que vous, dans votre tête, vous ne dites pas des fois, mon Dieu, est-ce que je ne suis pas en train de mettre la sécurité de mon équipe, de mes bénévoles, de tous les gens qui m'accompagnent à risque en sortant de l'autobus?
Est-ce que vous savez ce qui met les gens à risque? De ne pas se faire vacciner, de reculer face à la science, de ne pas être là pour protéger les gens avec un pays qui prend les mesures nécessaires pour qu'on en finisse avec cette pandémie. Donc oui, ma job en tant que Premier ministre c'est de protéger les gens. Et je vais y penser dans l'instant, et je vais y penser dans les mesures qu'on met de l'avant pour les mois et les années à venir. Il y a toujours des choix difficiles et importants à faire en politique, et j'espère pouvoir faire les bonnes. Je pense qu'on est en train de prendre les bonnes, mais ça fait partie des discussions et des choix que les Canadiens ont à faire dans cette élection.
Next question.
Hi, Mr. Trudeau. You just said that you can't let the, quote, anti-vaxxer mob dictate the future, and you also said that you can't back down. But security aside, do you not feel that your attendance at events like yesterday, where the protesters are largely not wearing masks, there is no social distancing, does that not pose a health risk to you, your security detail, and your supporters who were there? Some of them were young, unvaccinated children as well.
First of all, the idea that those anti-vaxxers were choosing not to wear masks for the protest, but were about to go home or to the grocery store or to visit their friends and wear masks is simply not true. I mean, they're going to be putting people at risk wherever they go, which is part of why we're going to make sure that people who choose not to get vaccinated don't get on a plane or a train, don't get to work in the public service, don't get by working with the provinces on vaccine certifications and mandates, don't get to go to movie theaters or gyms or restaurants and other non-essential services. That's how we keep people safe. And that actually is part of the choice Canadians get to make in this election. And that's why it's so important to continue to stand strong and determined on moving forward in the right way. Aaron O'Toole basically said that any of those anti-vaxxers who were protesting could be sitting across the aisle from your 12-year-old on a flight south in a few months. But they'd have gotten tested. That's not good enough. That's where we disagree, and that is something we are going to continue to stand strongly on, and Liberals across the country, alongside Canadians who continue to know this is the way forward, will continue to stand strong for the future.
Following up.
That didn't quite answer my question, but I will move on. After the border was opened to fully vaccinated Americans and their children last month, border crossings more than doubled with traffic of people coming from the U.S. Dr. Tam has now said that we are in a fourth wave, estimating in the recent modeling we could be seeing up to 15,000 cases a day by the end of the month. So why do you believe that now is a good time to open the border even further to foreign nationals, despite the fact that ICU beds are starting to get filled up and case counts are also on the rise?
Fully vaccinated foreign nationals. Fully vaccinated Americans. Those are the people who are allowed to come to Canada right now. Because we know that this fourth wave that is filling up ICU beds and putting a strain on healthcare systems across the country and slowing down our economic recovery in certain parts of the country is a wave that is affecting the unvaccinated primarily. Almost 80% of Canadians did what they needed to do and got vaccinated and now expect to be able to get back to normal and want our economy to recover. And that does mean welcoming in business travelers and tourists from places around the world as long as they are vaccinated. Because that's not where the risks are right now. That's how we get through this. And those 80% of Canadians and their kids who've done the right things, they deserve to get back to normal as quickly as possible, and that's what we are allowing for. We will always monitor the risks, but right now the risk is by and to unvaccinated Canadians, which is why it's so important to do your part and get the shot if you haven't yet.
Prochaine question.
Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau. Catherine Lévesque, la presse canadienne. Vous parliez à un jeune garçon tout à l'heure, Ricky, je pense, et vous expliquiez à quel point vous collaboriez avec les provinces et les territoires pendant la pandémie. Je me demandais, pendant la campagne électorale, où est cette collaboration? Est-ce que vous rencontrez les premiers ministres quand même ou vous allez attendre jusqu'à la fin de la campagne pour le faire?
Je pense qu'on a bien démontré une capacité de travailler ensemble, mais pendant que le premier ministre Horgan était en campagne électorale, pendant cette pandémie, pendant que le premier ministre Moe était dans sa campagne électorale au Saskatchewan et des autres, on n'a pas travaillé directement avec eux, mais on a pu quand même collaborer entre de gouvernement en gouvernement pour s'assurer que les bonnes mesures soient faites. On va continuer d'assurer une collaboration entre les différents paliers de gouvernement, même si pendant une campagne électorale, d'habitude, les chefs et les premiers ministres ne se parlent pas.
Ensuite.
Très bien, c'était très clair. Je voulais aussi revenir aux événements d'hier. Donc, vous ciblez Erin O'Toole, on le comprend très bien, mais ce qu'on voyait là-bas, c'était des pancartes du Parti populaire du Canada. Alors, pourquoi cibler M. O'Toole et pas Maxime Bernier?
Bien, je pense que tout d'abord, la position un peu floue que M. O'Toole est en train de prendre par rapport à la vaccination, il ne va pas exiger, par exemple, que des gens en train ou en avion soient pleinement vaccinés. Il ne va pas exiger que la fonction publique fédérale soit vaccinée. Il ne va même pas s'attendre à ce que tous ces candidats soient pleinement vaccinés. Démontre que, oui, il est en train d'essayer d'aller chercher les votes de gens qui sont anti-vaccins. Mais effectivement, on voit aussi que de plus en plus, il y a une formation politique extrêmement à droite, le Parti populaire, qui est en train d'accueillir avec brio ces gens qui sont anti-science, qui sont anti-vaccins, qui jouent dans les théories de conspiration. Je trouve que c'est dommage, mais c'est encore plus important, évidemment, que tous les Canadiens sortent et s'expriment clairement en faveur de la vaccination, en faveur d'une croissance économique forte, rapide. Et pour ça, il faut faire le choix d'avancer et non de reculer.
Next question.
Good afternoon, Mr. Trudeau. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News. Your party is highlighting a proposal today that says a re-elected Liberal government would introduce legislation that would protect businesses and organizations that require vaccinations from employees and customers from legal protections. And I'm wondering how exactly you would implement such a piece of legislation and why this is necessary. Can't businesses make these restrictions themselves?
What we've seen, unfortunately, and more in the United States than in Canada, but there have been examples in Canada of either businesses or individuals who are choosing to display anger and contempt and look for measures to punish or to go after in the courts businesses to put forward vaccine certificates or mask mandates as they need to. We've simply said that we will be there to have those businesses' backs as they do the right thing. There are a number of different ways that the Justice Department is looking at ensuring that they do not have to fear being sued for demanding that people be vaccinated. But we will make sure that we're helping them know that they're doing the right thing and know that we'll have their backs as they do it.
Following up.
There were a lot of anti-vaccine messages yesterday in Newmarket, but we know that there are some people who are unvaccinated who are not showing up at these protests. They can't get a vaccine because of health reasons, they don't have the right information, or they're genuinely scared, and they're not part of special interest groups. And I'm wondering what your message is to those Canadians who feel that you are abandoning them and turning society against them.
My message to those Canadians is one I give every single day. It's time to get vaccinated. I can understand that people were saying in the beginning, oh, you know what, let's make sure that seniors get it, the most vulnerable get it. Let's make sure that it goes to those high priority populations first, as we did. We sent doses to the north. We sent doses to Indigenous communities. When there was a scarcity around vaccines, there were a lot of people saying, you know what, I'm going to wait. And that was fine. But we now have enough vaccines in this country for everyone who's eligible to get vaccinated. And the reality is that as we recover, as people get back to normal, normal will arrive first and quickest for people who chose to get vaccinated, to protect themselves, to protect their loved ones, to keep out of the ICUs that we are seeing filling up right now. So the incentives and framework we're putting forward of saying that you're not going to be able to get on a train or a plane if you're not fully vaccinated. In many provinces, you won't be able to go to dinner in a restaurant or go to the gym or go to the movies or go to a sporting event unless you're fully vaccinated. So people who haven't yet chosen to get vaccinated but are considering it need to see that our country is deciding that we will move forward for everyone who is vaccinated and try and convince, through all sorts of information campaigns and direct appeals, but also with a federal framework that does everything it can to get as many people vaccinated as possible, because that's the way through this pandemic.
Next question.
Hi, Holly Mackenzie-Suter with the Canadian Press. Just following up on your proposal to offer legal protection for proof of vaccination. I mean, a lot of doctors, business groups are now asking for a unified national plan on vaccine certification, and we do have this patchwork, some provinces enforcing it, some aren't, and it does kind of leave the frontline worker or the business up to face that aggression. So are we going to see something more from you in terms of a national plan? Like, are there plans to take it a step further if you're elected?
I will remind folks, including, unfortunately, some of our my fellow party leaders, that your vaccination information is not held by the federal government. Your vaccination status is part of your provincial healthcare system. So the federal government cannot, without the provinces, simply emit some sort of vaccine standard. We have been working with the provinces for many months now, and we will be bringing in a federal standard that will allow for international travel. But in the interim, and as a first step, since a number of provinces have chosen to step forward with vaccine certification of their own, we have decided that the best way to do that is to work with each of them so that they are reasonably standardized across the country, and so that there is a federal certification on that that will be accepted for international travel. It is an interim measure, perhaps will last a year or so, before we bring in the formalized passport version of it. But right now, because most Canadians are not worried about whether or not they can go to Paris or the Dominican Republic right now, they're worried about whether they can go to their favorite diner down the street. They're worried about when they can go back to the movies, where they're worried about whether they're going to be able to be safe at the gym. Provinces are stepping up with vaccine certifications, which is why we're making that easier for the provinces to decide by saying, we'll foot the bill for it. We'll pay for provinces that choose to move forward with vaccine mandates around certifications. That's how we're working together right now.
Following up.
Yeah, follow up. Today you talked a lot about Donald Trump. We're also hearing a lot of this American-style gun rhetoric, and I just wanted to hear from you kind of why this is a theme coming up right now and how it applies to the election, especially since Donald Trump isn't the president anymore.
Well, I think when we talk about steel workers and Labor Day and standing up for steel, Canadians well remember the threat our steel workers were under, our aluminum workers, and all Canadians were under from the previous American administration, and need to also be reminded that Erin O'Toole and the Conservatives were nowhere in that fight. Even as we worked with Conservative premiers across the country, back in Ottawa, people were saying things like, oh, it's dumb policy to go for one-to-one tariffs, which was the thing that made Donald Trump eventually back down. So I think that's a very pertinent example as we talk about Labor Day today. But secondly, on the guns things, it's not about American-style politics. It's about leadership. It's about integrity. It's about saying what you mean and doing what you say. And what we're increasingly seeing from Erin O'Toole is that he doesn't meet that bar. He said one thing, black and white, in his platform, because he promised it to the gun lobby, And now he's trying to reverse his position, say, no, no, I don't mean what I said on the platform anymore, which is easy to do because he hasn't costed the platform, and trying to convince Canadians that, no, 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 he's going forward. Well, listen, when you get two disparate groups, like Police Se Souvient on one side and the gun lobby on the other side, saying Erin O'Toole hasn't changed his position on reversing our assault weapon ban, you see the kind of leadership that Erin O'Toole is putting forward. And it's not just on guns. We've all seen the videos of him talking about the need for more private delivery of health care. And he's trying to pretend he never said that. We've all seen him trying to pretend in Quebec that he's going to continue to fund the increase in childcare spaces, when in his platform it shows that no, he's not going to send the billions of dollars to the provinces that it's going to take to create $10 a day childcare right across the country and increase spaces for Quebec families. He's trying to say whatever he can to Canadians to get elected, even though he's said the opposite to special interest groups, from anti-vaxxers to anti-choice groups to climate deniers. He can't even convince his party that climate change is real. That's not the kind of leadership Canadians need, not in this time of crisis, not ever. And Canadians are beginning to see that that's the future being offered by Erin O'Toole, a future of wishy-washy, weak leadership where he doesn't stand up for what he believes in, doesn't tell Canadians what he actually believes.
We'll take one last local question.
Hi, Mr. Trudeau. I'll go back to the beginning, I guess. Sorry. I'll go back to the beginning. I just wanted to ask you what the decision to come specifically to Welland and Niagara, specifically on Labor Day, and the importance of the manufacturing industry to this region.
As Vance pointed out in his introduction, this is a region that has seen an awful lot of transformations over the years. We've seen a wonderful rise in tourism over the past years, but we have seen a decline in manufacturing jobs. And we all remember how important it was for Canadians to stand together against the attacks on our steel industry, on our aluminum industry, on our workers that the Trump administration was posing a number of years ago. And that is a proof point on how we will continue to stand up for workers. But I also want to say, and when we made our big environmental announcement earlier in this campaign, I did it in a similarly industrial setting, surrounded by workers, to demonstrate the point that we have long believed, that building a better future for Canadians means both fighting against climate change and fighting for better jobs at the same time, that it's not a choice between one or the other. The Conservatives have never gotten that. They still think you can have a plan for the economy without having a real plan to fight climate change. But that's not true. And that's why I salute the workers here and the leadership here that have moved forward on demonstrating that Canada's steel industry, as we're seeing across the country as well, and certainly our aluminum industry as well, can be increasingly competitive in a low-carbon world. This facility uses electric arc, not coal power. We've made investments in Algoma and in Dofasco to allow them to switch off coal-fired to electric. These are the things that don't just secure good jobs right now, ensure careers, not just for the people behind me, but for their kids right here in this region. Fighting climate change is about creating good jobs for the future at the same time. It's not a choice. The Conservatives don't get that. Unfortunately, the NDP seem to have forgotten that. And we continue to stand for the fight against climate change, to fighting for workers, to standing up for a better Canada. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. This is what ends today's press conference.